what does prosperity really mean to you?
When I say prosperity or wealth, I'm talking about life enriching, like life enhancing goods and services, like food, clothing, housing, healthcare, education. It's not money, it's what makes money valuable. Even though your bank account has the same number, you're actually twice as rich in what matters, in real terms.
So why do you think some countries are more prosperous than the others?
Countries with higher economic freedom tend to experience higher average incomes, lower rate of poverty, more innovation.
What is economic freedom mean to you?
In simple terms, economic freedom is a measure of the degree to which you can control what you do with your body and your property, as long as you respect other people's equal right to control their body and their property.
Thomas Sowell, The Ant and the Grasshopper, is a modern continuation of the classic fable. The ant spends the summer working hard and storing food, while the grasshopper enjoys life without caring for future. Then one fine day, winter comes and the grasshopper, who's very hungry, comes to ant asking for help. The story then introduces another ant called Lefty, who argues that the hardworking ant should share his food with the grasshopper because life's rewards are distributed unfairly. To satire and humor, Sowell contrasts the personal responsibility with the idea that the society should redistribute results of others' hearts. As the story progresses, Lefty creates systems to take care of the grasshoppers instead of teaching them discipline or self-reliance. Over time, even the ants begin adopting carefree lifestyle. Eventually, everyone enjoys themselves all summer long until the winter comes again. The message of the story is that a society cannot survive if responsibility, preparation, and hard work disappear. Yash Arya connects this timeless fable to a modern idea that prosperity isn't guaranteed. It is built, protected, and sustained by the systems we support and by the mindset we choose to adopt. Please join me in welcoming Yash Arya, proudly raised in Mumbai and now building his life in California and working as a staff technical engineer at VMware. Welcome Yash to episode 12 of the Sunday Sitdown with Subhi. Hello Yash, how are you doing today? How's your Sunday going?
Hey Subhi, I'm good. Yeah, my Sunday is doing quite well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for removing time and coming and sort of sharing your knowledge on the show. I hope the viewers get to see our interesting conversation today and get to take away something from it and implement in their day-to-day life. So let's begin the episode 12 of the Sunday Sit Down with Subhi with Yash Arya. So before I started this conversation with you, I was just narrating the story of the ant and grasshopper to our viewers. So I would like to ask you about your opinion. What lessons do you take away from it?
Sure. So, very quickly, the gist of the ant and the grasshopper story is that during the summer, the ant is working hard to collect food, and it's easier to find food in the summer. So, the ant is also working to save food for the winter. But the grasshopper is just chilling, having a good time, making fun of the ant for working so hard. And then at the end of the day, when winter comes, the ant is fine, but the grasshopper is at the mercy of the ant.
Yeah.
So for me, the two key takeaways of the story are, first is that prosperity isn't automatic. And second is that avoiding small problems leads to bigger problems.
As a society, what lessons would you want us to take away from it? As the entire society and everybody who's watching this show.
So let's break it down this way. We'll touch on both of the lessons in the context of the society. So first we have to understand one thing, which is that we don't automatically get good laws. In the long run, we get popular laws. Because if a politician supports unpopular laws, then sooner or later they are replaced by other politicians who support popular laws. Okay. So now think of it this way. Good laws promote peace and prosperity. Bad laws promote conflict and poverty. But we don't get good laws automatically. And often good laws sound harsh, while bad laws might sound kind. So we need a certain analytical tool to differentiate between laws that are good from laws that simply sound good. So that if we want peace and prosperity, then it is up to all of us to popularize this way of thinking that helps us distinguish good and bad laws. And the longer we wait to do this, that is the second lesson where the bigger the problem becomes. Because that's how many more people now have accumulated misconceptions about what makes a law good or bad and so forth.
So, what does prosperity really mean to you?
Yeah, so when I say prosperity or wealth, I'm talking about life enriching, like life enhancing goods and services like food, clothing, housing, healthcare, education, art, all of these things. So it's not money, it's what makes money valuable. Like the whole reason we value money is because it gives us access to all of these things, right? So hypothetically, if you had the same amount of money, but somehow it could buy you twice as many valuable goods and services, then even though your bank account has the same number, you're actually twice as rich in what matters in real terms. Yeah. So in economics, when we speak about wealth or prosperity, that's what we are referring to, and money is just a means to get to it, not the end in itself. So if you use your wealth wisely, then you can improve your life, you can improve human flourishing. But if you use it foolishly, then of course you can hurt human flourishing. However, before we use it wisely or foolishly, wealth has to be created to begin with, and that is where we are right now. Okay. So why do you think some countries are more prosperous than the others, and the countries which are not that into prosperity, why are they struggling exactly? What would be the reason behind it? Yeah. So I'll give you the quick formula first and then we'll break it down. The quick formula is economic freedom leads to prosperity, and then prosperity leads to human flourishing. Now, I'll explain exactly what economic freedom means in a little bit. But for now, I just want to look over some interesting correlations between economic freedom and things that a lot of us people value. So that could be things like countries with higher economic freedom tend to experience higher average incomes, less severe poverty, lower rate of poverty. So meaning fewer people are poor, and also those who are poor are still not as poor as the poor people in other countries. More innovation. And we can sort of see that countries that have more prosperity, opportunities, and innovation will also tend to have these other correlations, which is higher life expectancy. People tend to live longer. Lower infant mortality. Children are less likely to die. Lower rates of child labor, which is generally considered like not a really acceptable social practice, because we want children to be able to get a good education instead of being rushed into unsafe working conditions and so forth. Cleaner environment, less bigotry like racism, sexism, and so on, and lower levels of corruption. And also, finally, higher self reported life satisfaction. Because some might wonder, what's the point of all of this progress if at the end of the day people don't report being more satisfied with their lives? So it turns out that they do report more satisfaction with their lives. So we have all of these charts available for us that show this correlation, and any interested viewer can like pause and just take a look at the charts if they're interested. But that is the overall theme that we find here. But note that I haven't proven that economic freedom is the cause of these things. Right now, I'm just showing that it often goes hand in hand with all of these other benefits. Yeah. So, okay. So it's a very interesting point. First of all, there is a bigger reason behind it. It's not just correlation. Okay, so that makes economic freedom sound very interesting. So I would like to tell the viewers that after this conversation, we are going to sort of display some of the screenshots of the findings that Yash has found out, wherein he can talk about how like prosperity is sort of related to economic freedom and what benefits it's bringing to the countries, why some countries are more prosperous, and that will basically help the viewers get the insight in a better way. And to you, Yash, my next question to you would be, since it looks like economic freedom is very important. So, simple language, what is economic freedom to mean to you, so that viewers can understand who do not have much, like haven't heard or talked much about this topic with people, and they are hearing this for the first time, so they would understand what it means. So, can you just explain to them? Sure. So I want to say when I start out, it might sound complicated, but by the time I'm done explaining, I hope more people will understand it. So let's try to understand economic freedom in terms of what it means, what a government can do to increase it, and then I'll also tie it to how I define capitalism, like what I mean when I say capitalism, keeping in mind that not everyone uses the word the same way. All right.
Yeah.
This is just vocabulary that I need for my conversation.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll quote from the 2025 Economic Freedom of the World. That's a report published by Fraser Institute. And I'll quote and then I'll explain the quote that they have over there. So, quote, though it is possible to define economic freedom in absolute terms, it is more useful to think of it as a spectrum. Individuals are more economically free when they're allowed to make more of their own economic choices, with others imposing fewer and less severe constraints on these choices. These choices, however, must respect the rights of others. So now let's unpack this in simpler language. So in simple terms, economic freedom is a measure of the degree to which you can control what you do with your body and your property, as long as you respect other people's equal right to control their body and their property. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a common saying that sort of captures this view, which is that your right to swing your fist ends at the other person's nose, ends where my nose begins. So let's continue to add a little bit more onto this. Quote, if all individuals own themselves, no one has a right to the time, talents, and resources of anyone else. Threats to economic freedom may arise from the government or from individuals using force or fraud to limit the economic choices of others. Okay, so again, now let's zoom out and like understand that in simple terms. Basically, having economic freedom means that you don't own anyone and nobody owns you, right? So since you don't own other people, you don't have a right to demand their time, their energy, their resources without their consent, without their approval, right? That is the key idea of economic freedom. But at the same time, you don't get to make choices that force other people to lose control over their property or their body, right? So now I think we can make this concrete by looking at what a government should and shouldn't do in order to increase economic freedom. So some things that a government should do to increase economic freedom or can do to increase economic freedom are well understood, such as like having laws against theft, shoplifting, burglary, kidnapping, slavery, and so on. Because all of these actions are violating someone's control over their body or their property.
Yeah.
And so if we want to preserve economic freedom, then these things should be outlawed. At the same time, though, there are many things that a government should refrain from doing in order to increase economic freedom. And these things are less well understood. Okay. So we'll quote from the report again to see what some of these things are, and then I'll add some more context to it. So, quote, in economically free places, governments refrain from actions like high taxation, barriers to trade, excessive regulations that restrict personal choice, interference with voluntary exchange, and limit entry to markets. All right. So in a gist, what is the proper role of government then? Quote, the government protects people and their property rights from aggressors, but otherwise allows them to make their own economic choices.
Okay.
Right? So for instance, imagine having something like price ceilings where you're not allowed to sell something above a certain price, or a minimum wage law where I may be happy to accept a job at a certain wage, but there is a law against it, or a rent ceiling law where the government decides whether I can raise rents above a certain limit or above a certain percentage or not. So these are all examples of things that reduce economic freedom. Now, I am not prescribing whether a people ought to prefer economic freedom or not. I am simply pointing out the consequences of low and high economic freedom, and then I'm hoping that people can make their choices accordingly, right? Okay. So when I talk about capitalism, I mean a political system with maximum economic freedom, right?
Okay.
Meaning a political system with complete protection of your individual liberty, like over your body and private property, right? So in this meaning of the word, no country, past or present, has been fully capitalist. But we know that the closer a country gets to this ideal, the more prosperous people tend to be and the more flourishing we have. So I finally want to call out that critics of capitalism are rarely talking about the same thing as I am, as in a system of maximum economic freedom. In fact, in my view, and we can get to this later, the problems that they describe are typically so the problems that they often identify, they're typically a result of economic freedom not being complete. And because they misunderstand the problem, they misdiagnose the problem, the solutions that they offer tend to reduce economic freedom even further, which causes a spiral of ever worsening problems. Okay. And there's a very interesting essay by an economist, Ludwig von Mises. It's called "The Middle of the Road Leads to Socialism." And the key idea is that if you accept a little bit of compromise on economic freedom or on capitalism, that itself creates the pressures for there to be more and more compromises later on. So we can link the essay for the audience if anyone is interested to take a look at it. But that is the core idea over here.
Okay. So, can you tell how exactly economic freedom leads to prosperity?
So, by the way, the good news is that this was the most difficult concept that I had to explain to the audience, which is economic freedom. Okay. So now I think things should be easier going forward. Okay. So how exactly does economic freedom lead to prosperity? The short answer, again, first let's just have the short answer. That is, specialization in trade requires economic freedom. And specialization in trade is the basic mechanism of all wealth production. Now let's elaborate, because I haven't explained what I mean by specialization in trade, right? Yeah. So if we understand wealth in terms of the real goods and services that enhance our lives, everything from food to healthcare that we talked about before, then we understand that these things don't automatically come into existence. They have to be produced before they can be used, before they can be consumed, right? So wealth has to be produced first. So that basically only gives you two options fundamentally in which you might try to produce wealth. The first is you try to do everything by yourself. But then you're not going to be any good at it. Imagine if you had to figure out everything from how to farm to how to be a software engineer, do the hardware, be a doctor, be a lawyer, all of that, right? Be a plumber. So if you were left alone, if any of us was left alone on a desert island, we would basically remain in the primitive state of humankind. There's just absolutely no way we could innovate our way out of it. Yeah. So self-sufficiency, the way Adam Smith put it is that self-sufficiency leads to inefficiency, and inefficiency leads to poverty. Like you're stuck in poverty, you're not able to get out of it. Okay, so trying to do everything by yourself in isolation is not the answer. The other option is specialization in trade, essentially, or sometimes it's called division of labor. But basically, we recognize that people have different strengths and interests. So if you focus on doing what you're better at, or at least what you're more interested in, and I focus on doing what I am better at, and then we agree to exchange some of our products and services with each other at a mutually beneficial terms, then because you're focusing on some things and I'm focusing on other things and so on for everyone, we can also get better at making these things, at doing these things. And so that is the basic recipe to come out of poverty, which is that you increase productivity through specialization and trade, and then you get much more done with fewer resources and in less time. And that leads to prosperity. Yeah. So this is the basic gist of specialization in trade. But I think it's useful to zoom in and capture some key things about specialization in trade, because understanding this will keep us from accidentally creating conditions where specialization in trade breaks down. So the first thing is that by trade, I mean voluntary exchange, like exchange by mutual consent to mutual benefit. It is only because both parties expect to benefit from the trade that they agree to it. Otherwise, they have the option to say no to it. And even if they end up regretting a certain trade in the future, often that is the best path for people to figure out where their real preferences are. So, because trade is by mutual consent to mutual benefit, that is why economic freedom is important, because the idea of economic freedom is you get to decide how you're going to use your property, your body, right? If you can be forced into it, then you can't trade. And without trade, we can't have specialization in trade. So that's the second thing I want to zoom into. Specialization refers to the production aspect, which is what do I make? And trade refers to the distribution aspect, which is what do I get in exchange for what I'm making, right? Okay. So these two things are interconnected. You can't have one without the other. It is only because of specialization. It is only because I'm making something else or I'm doing something else and you're doing something else that we have any need to trade to begin with. The only reason that I can focus on being a software engineer is because I know I can get paid for it. There are customers for it in the market. And that is why I don't need to worry about learning how to do my plumbing or how to how to farm and how to run a hospital and so on and so forth, because if I didn't have enough customers for what I want to do, then I have to do more things, right? Then I can't afford to specialize in that thing. Yeah. So the key aspect is that the production and the distribution aspect of wealth creation are interconnected. You can't have one without the other. And the reason I'm clarifying this in so much detail is because when people don't understand that these things are tightly interconnected, you often have discussions about changing the way wealth is distributed without taking into consideration the effect it has on the production of wealth. So any action, let's say like taxes, any barriers to trade, regulations, redistribution, or just plain old theft, that makes the distribution less favorable for either participant of the trade will also have perverse or will also discourage the incentives to continue producing.